All right, this lesson is going to focus on decimal place value, and then we're going to focus on decimal and fraction relationships because we just did finish our fraction unit. You're going to notice that fractions and decimals are literally the same thing. They're just written differently. A fraction is written as a fraction and a decimal is written as a decimal. The key with decimals, though, is being able to properly pronounce the decimal, because that's going to help you write the fraction. So when we get through this lesson, you'll understand kind of what I mean by that when we get there. But before we get there, before you can actually say a decimal correctly, you have to understand a decimal's place value. So let's do just a quick review of place value in general. So if I look up here at this very large number and I were to say the number in standard form, this number represents 2,432,165. Okay? And just reviewing place value in general, this number does not have a decimal. So if I start here at the 5, that's my ones place, my tens, my hundreds, my thousands, my 10,000s, my 100,000s, and my millions place, okay, which is what we have been used to. So you're very good as far as knowing your place value on a number without a decimal. Now I'm going to throw some decimals at you. This is place value with decimals, okay? If I just look at this number here, you have your decimal. To the left of it, that number is 42, okay? That's what it is. So if I were to cover this up, it's 42. 2 is in your ones place, 4 is in your tens place. But then I'm going to introduce that decimal and then the first number behind it. This number 1 has a place value, just like this 2 has a place value, just like this 4 has a place value, okay? And that first number behind your decimal is known as your tenths place. All right, so when I say this number, I would say 42 and 1/10. Notice the next one. I've got a 1 and now I've got a 2. All right, the next place after that first number behind the decimal is known as your hundredths place. So if I were to say this number, I would say 42 and 12 hundredths. Moving on. The last place value that we go in 4th grade is your thousandths place. Okay, so notice you have a decimal. It's going to be that third place after your decimal. I would say 42 and 124 thousandths. Okay, so again, you guys are used to knowing ones, tens, hundreds, 10,000s, 100,000s, and millions. Those are all place values to the left of a decimal. You now have to memorize and learn and understand place value to the right of a decimal, okay? And the 3 you have to know are your tenths, hundredths, and thousandths. All right, so let's practice here. Let's look at this first one. I've got my 2 underlined, okay? And you can use my information up here at the top. Think about where you think the 2 would live, its place. Would it be the tenths, the hundredths, or the thousandths place? I hope you were thinking in your head that it's the hundredths place, because it is, okay? This number here would represent 4 and 32 hundredths, okay? Next number, notice the 4 is underlined. It's to the right of the decimal. That 4 is either the tenths, hundredths, or thousandths place. Where do you think it's going to live? If you were thinking the tenths place, you would be correct. Okay, this is your tenths place. All right, next one. I'm looking at this 7. Again, it is to the right of the decimal. Think about where that 7 would live, either the tenths, hundredths, or thousandths place. I hope you were thinking the thousandths place. Okay, so again, place value for decimals, the only 3 places you're going to have to know are your tenths, hundredths, and thousandths. And notice they all end in a THS. All right, Okay. How do you say numbers with decimals? All right, that's important because I told you later on we start talking about decimal and fractional relationships. That's going to come into play when you are relating a fraction to a decimal. So now that we've kind of reviewed our place value or our place, we're going to look and actually put it together here. So if I look at this number, again, I'm covering up my decimal. That's a regular 67. A 7's in your ones place, a 6 is in your tens place. But then there's a decimal, okay? It's still a 67 as of right now. All right? If I remove my finger, now I have a number behind my decimal. So when I were to say this particular number here, I would say 67 and 2 tenths. Okay? Looking at this one, again, if I were to cover it up, this is 3,491. Okay, it goes all the way up to your thousands place. There's my decimal. It's still 3,491. When I remove my thumb, here's my number. 3,491 and 29 hundredths. Okay, because this 9 goes up to my hundredths place. If I look at number 3, I cover it up, that's a regular 49. Okay, if I remove my thumb, I would say 49 and 72 thousandths because it goes up to the thousandths place. Okay, all right. Let's look at standard form to written form, okay? Standard form is the number. So if I look at this number, there's my 6, okay, that's in the ones place, and there's my 3, that's in the tenths place. So if I can say it in standard form, I can write it. So from standard form to written, I would say 6 and 3 tenths. Here's my standard form. I've got a 29 and 12 hundredths. 29 and 12 hundredths. Because again, this goes up to my hundredths place. If I take a standard and I go to expanded form, that means I'm giving the value of every single digit. Okay, the value of 6, that's in the ones place. That's 6 ones. Okay, so that's why I just have 6 because that's 6 ones. I'm going to add that to 4 tenths. All right, to 4 tenths. I'm adding it over to 4 tenths. Plus, I'm going to add it to 3 hundredths. Well, how am I going to represent 3 hundredths in expanded form? I'll show you. It would show decimal 0.3. That 0, okay, is representing that place here where that 4 would come down. Okay, and how do I know I'm going to get 6 and 43 hundredths back? If you line up your decimals, 6 decimal 0, there's your 4 tenths, there's your 3 hundredths, and I line up my decimal and I add everything up, I'm going to get 6 and 43 hundredths back. Here's another example. I've got 24 and 57 hundredths. Well, let's break down the 24 first in expanded form. You know how to do that. That's really a 20 plus a 4. Okay, so 20 plus 4, that's the value. There's 2 tens, there's 4 ones. Plus 5 tenths, there it is, plus 7 hundredths, because this is representing my hundredths place. If I were to line them all up, there's my 20, there's my 4, there's my 5 tenths, there's my 7 hundredths, and I line up my decimals and I add them up, I'm going to get back 24 and 57 hundredths. Okay, here's another one. 12 and 492 thousandths. Again, if I'm finding the value of this 12, that's 110, there it is, plus 2 ones. Plus, there's my 4 tenths to represent 9 hundredths. I'm going to say plus 0.9. And now to represent my thousandths, I'm going to say plus 2 thousandths. So I had to have a 002 to reach my thousandths place. Again, I can line them up. There's my 10, there's my 2, my 4 tenths, my 9 hundredths, my 2 thousandths. Line them up, and I get back 12 and 492 thousandths. Okay, so you guys know how to break down expanded. It's just a little bit different when you have your decimals. Okay, it still deals with place value though. You have to make sure it's in the correct place value. That's why we have these zeros in these places before, like your thousandths. You have your hundredths, you have your tenths. You have your hundredths, you have your tenths. That's very important. So that's going from a standard to an expanded. All right, now we're getting to the part where we're going to actually relate decimals to fractions. And I told you if you can say the decimal correctly, you can write the fraction correctly. For example, number 1, if I read this decimal, that is 6 tenths. So how would I write that as a fraction? Oh, I would write it as 6 tenths. If I were to say this decimal, 71 hundredths, how would I write that as a fraction? 71 over 100. If I were to say this decimal, 429 thousandths, how would I write that as a fraction? 429 thousandths. So again, if you can correctly say